we're going to introduce some JavaScript into the mix. Even though responsive designs can redo your layout depending upon the screen width, how about when there's interaction? Only on the mobile side of responsive do we want to show the hamburger menu, and upon click of that hamburger menu, we need to display a menu system. How is this going to be achieved? With simple JavaScript. Let me show you a quick result, and then we'll get into more of JavaScripting. Here's page content, and look what happens when I roll over. It changes into a different sentence. Hello. How was this achieved? This is achieved by using on mouse over to run a JavaScript function, and I have a JavaScript file here now. Let's make this more like the menu scenario. Under menu systems, there's no rollover when you're using a mobile phone, it's clicking. Let me change this to on click equals a function. I made up the name of this function, and I made up what this function does. Go refresh this page. On rollover, nothing happens, but on click, that changes. What we're looking to do on the mobile menu, when we click the hamburger menu, we want to display a whole new div with selections in it, and then have a box to close that div layer. This is mostly it. Click something, and something else happens. All right, let's take a look into JavaScripting. We've been linking to style sheets. We can also link to a script file, and I made a file called menu.js. The type is text JavaScript, and unlike the link tag, there is this closing. I then created a file with a function, and I'll rebuild this function. I'll get back to that in a moment. How does JavaScript know to apply things to a page? It knows to do things and interaction, either based upon other scripting or based upon user input. The user input I was using here, on click, change text. That's all that's happening. Without putting an ID here, let me make a new function. And that function will be called, how about alert me? And alert me will open up a dialog box, an alert box. And that alert box will say, hello, you have been alerted. Simple message like that. Functions begin with the word function, all lowercase. It's a proper word of the language. You can see in editors, words of a language appear in particular color. Alert me is a function I made up. Could have been anything. Followed by parentheses. These parentheses can have parameters passed into it. Right now the parentheses are empty, so no information is being passed into it. Curly Q bracket, and within there is the definition of this function. What does this function do? It opens an alert box with this message displayed. All right, if alert means the function, let me copy it so I don't misspell it. On click of this div tag and anything in this div tag, run this function called alert me. This page knows to find the function because I connected the page to an external JavaScript file. Saving it. Let me also change test alert. Refreshing. When I interact with this element by clicking, an alert box comes up. Hello, you have been alerted. Exactly what I typed out. Alert boxes aren't going to advance our design. We need a hamburger menu to be a clickable area, and upon click, show new div. That's our goal. Let me connect this into our scenario of the navigation bar, even though I'm working on the page. Starting with what we already know, I just want the menu item to appear here, and that's an image. and that image has a source, and that source would be img/menu.png because that's where I placed the menu PNG and that's its name. And the alt text for it be menu. I'm going to apply a style sheet to this. Might as well give this a class. But instead of a class, if I'm going to be doing JavaScript, classes are meant to be used on multiple elements. If there's only one menu on my page and I want an easy way to go find this menu with JavaScript, instead of class, I'm going to use ID. ID equals my menu, maybe, or just menu. I know there's a lot of menus here, but you could use as many as you want, or you could change ID to something else. In styles, I can still define, instead of .menu as a class, I'm going to use #menu to define that it's going to refer to something on the page with an ID. All IDs should be unique. Otherwise, there'll be confusion with the style sheets and maybe some JavaScripting. The width of this menu will be 80 pixels. Save. Remember, normally we define a class, page, and outer, and I showed an example where I repeat outer and page on multiple divs to create a tiling effect. If you know something is unique on a page, then using #menu might be a good idea, especially if it's accessed through JavaScript. You need JavaScript to do something with it. So name things with a #menu here, and out here, ID equals menu. I've only assigned 80 pixels for the div. What I really need to do, div isn't 80 pixels, but it's the div's image is 80 pixels big. Review. There's the menu and does nothing because it's wired to do nothing yet. I stripped out all the JavaScript, so this does nothing. All right, let's make it do something. On click, I want another div to show up. Let me create another div, and that div is going to take over the whole page, and that will act as our menu system. I'm going to give it an ID. I'm going to call it menu overlay. And I'll write this is the full menu /div. I didn't apply any styling to the menu overlay. Let's just see what we have currently. Right now, it's appearing right after this div. So instead of appearing after this div, I want it to float right on top of everything, blocking the menu system in the background of the page. Let me start out with going to styles and defining the menu overlay, giving it a background color, and that background color will be, we give it pink, easy to see and remember. Refreshing. All right, now I want this menu to be the full page, and then I want this menu to overlay here. And when I mean full page, I don't want it to be covering this external page. Sometimes you do want that. Sometimes you want a full page takeover overlay. Here, I'm looking at it being just a mobile menu where I just want the content to be covered and maybe any background gutters to be free of content. This way the menu aligns within the area that we defined as content. If you want it to take over the whole page, totally doable as well. All right. The width is naturally full width. It already does that. Its height, though, maybe I'll make it 98 viewport height for now. Saving this, viewing it. So now it's fuller, but it's also introducing a scroll bar. I need this to overlay and hide the menu bar. And we do that using absolute positioning. Position, absolute. And I'm going to make the top 0 pixels from the top. And now I'll hit refresh. This menu overlay jumps right above our menu system. The reason why is because we're positioning it at 0 pixels and the page has a relative positioning. If the page didn't have a relative positioning, let me just remove that for a moment. Hit refresh. This is now a full screen takeover. See, I told you, same code for full screen takeover. Here, I'm just doing the takeover of the page content. The reason why this jumped to the full screen is because position relative was removed from the page, and then nothing else on this page has a positioning. So menu overlay is getting its position absolutely from the body. And the body is the full width and height of this browser window. To corral it in, let me put back my position relative, refresh. Being a menu system, we don't want it to just show up. We want it to be hidden to start, so display none. And then upon clicking of the menu item, it's displayed. And then finally, we'll have a close button over here. To hide the menu system, I'll set display to none. Now that menu system is hidden, right? No menu overlay. Now I want to click here to display the menu system. And this is what will bring us back to the JavaScript. JavaScript has not been involved up until this point. We've been preparing to use JavaScript by using these identifiers, £ID here for my selector, and setting divs using ID equals menu, not only to correspond with the styling that's being applied, here £menu image. This was done so JavaScript can communicate with these elements on the page. So what should this function be of JavaScript? On click of the menu item, do something. And what will it do? Instead of having the menu overlay as display none, let's make it display block. The block element will take up the full screen in this case. To start out with, within the menu ID, and on click. And this will be equal to a function. We're going to make up this function. I'm going to call this function show menu, followed by these parentheses, followed by a semicolon. When calling out to a function, you need these parentheses, and you end each function call with a semicolon here. Maybe you'll have other things going on this page, such as record click for those who are tracking what people are doing. The semicolons, just like with styling, separates things. Show menu, a function that I'll make sure you add the parentheses and the semicolon, and all this is within quotes. On click equals quote something, and that quote is what you want to do. Let me make a new function. Function show menu. What would this function do? This function has to go find menu overlay and set its display property to block. Document, go look at that HTML document. Get element by ID, and this is camel case sensitive. Don't mistype this word. And followed by these parentheses. Which element to get? The menu overlay. And that is in single quotes. Menu overlay refers to this ID of menu overlay. And don't get confused with ID of menu overlay. So go to the web page, find an element by its ID, capital B, capital I, menu overlay, and dot style. Find within this document an element by ID. Change its style of display equal to something. Don't forget the semicolon. Equal quote something, end quote, semicolon, and the something will be block. All this is saying, hey, go find this ID on the page, and whatever its property is for display, make it block now whenever you use this function. Saving this, going to this page, pressing refresh. You could click anywhere on this page and nothing will happen until we click here. Click. And that's what we want to happen. Let me hit it refresh again. Reason why nothing else on the page is clickable because we defined the clickable regions. If we wanted the whole page to be clickable, we would make the outer div or the inner page. And I could show that now. This same function can be reused. What if I wanted the page element? Anyone clicking on the page will see a menu. Why? I don't know. So I'm just going to reuse this onClick function. Don't forget the quote. So now this is the outer page. Nothing happens. But this is the page itself. When I click on it, it now becomes that hot spot. And that's because I assigned to the div and everything within that div this function. We just want the menu bar to be clickable. So we're almost there, right? We got a clickable menu area. Click. All I need to do is make something that closes menu. Click, and it closes. And then we can open, close menu, open, close menu. Let me correct something right now. The type of cursor that's showing up right now is just a blank arrow. On phones, it won't matter whatsoever because you don't see a little hand selector or pointer on a phone. Let me make the image. Whenever you roll your mouse over the image, it becomes that hand clicker. So cursor, pointer. Save that. And this is just a little UX thing. Now when I roll over, you can see the hand shows up, lets people know it's clickable. Let me put an X here, and that will finish off the menu. Everything else on the menu is just filling in the information. So within this menu, there will be a content area that would hold all the menu items. You want to call it menu items as a class or an ID, that's fine. Since it's unique, making an ID is fine. But not everything that's unique has to be made into an ID. So I'll just make a class. And I'm not going to complete the class. I'll just say, hey, this content will be menu items. Maybe that's a good name for it. I'll put one menu item in it. Home. Just so we could see this build out. So home. Maybe there's a product page and there's an innovation page and then there's help or contact or something like that. Revisiting this page, on click, we'll see this menu. Here's our menu items. We can have them centered. And we could have them centered by adding some properties to menu overlay. So menu overlay, the simplest one, of course, would be text align center. And then you could start spacing things out. You already know some styles, so make this look great. The next step, important step, I want that close button. And I'll make something called pound close. Its font size be 60 points. Its positions could be absolute. And it's going to be from the right, let's say 10 pixels, and from the top, 10 pixels. The close will be within the menu overlay container for its positioning. Let me create that div right now. Div/div. I'll use just a regular X for now, and maybe I'll modify that. Class is equal to close. Let's see how it looks. There's the X, but I want it to be way over there. That's why it wasn't picking up my class, because I didn't do dot close. So to keep it fair and even, I'll do pound close for ID. And instead of class, this is ID. Click. There's my X, and there's my menu items. Let me make the close button for this. And then you could always come back and stylize how these items look on the page. To make this into an official close button, we need to add some JavaScript to it. We got a script going. Show menu. Well, we'll do hide menu. We can make this more efficient and just pass a parameter where it's show menu on or off. And depending upon if the parameter is on, make the display block. And if it's off, make the display none. Start. I'll just make this simpler. Show menu. There's a hide menu. It's going to be the document.get element by ID, the same menu overlay. Its style of display will be none when you use hide menu. One step away from getting this to work. Within the close div, the IDs there of close for this div, on click, which function to run, and don't forget the quotes around the function, hide menu, and the parentheses, semicolon. Save this, save the JavaScript, and now run it. Click hamburger, click this to close. Click hamburger, click this to close, and I should add cursor pointer to this one just to balance things out. Style-wise, close button gets a cursor. Instead of using just an X right here, I'm going to use the entity ampersand times semicolon. This way it looks more like a close button. I want to add some customization, such as the spacing and how the inner menu offsets from the top. Within the HTML page, you create a div that wraps around all your menu items. Within the menu overlay, you have the close button, and then originally we had the menu items, and you can wrap that with another div called inner menu, and that inner menu can control the positioning, formatting, and the spacing of all the menu items on the inside. The style.css, here is the inner menu with a margin top of 50 pixels, pushing everything down by 50 pixels from the top. And then there's a .inner menu selector, defining the element, anything within here, of divs to have a padding of 50 pixels. And that was instead of defining a class for menu items. We could even remove the class for menu items. It could come in handy later on, so leave it for now. And this is the current result. Click here, you have your menu, click here, and click here to close it.